Hey guys, welcome to the Cast and Spear podcast. My name is John, and today we have back on the show Brian Fern at Uncle Learn You How on Instagram and all over the internets. Today we're going to be talking about roller spear guns. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thanks, John. Appreciate you having me.
First, let's start off with comparing a conventional, traditional style spear gun and a roller. What are the differences?
All right. So, the biggest difference we need to realize is when you have a conventional muzzled gun, that could be a 2 or 3 band muzzle gun. When those bands are at rest on the barrel, there's no tension there. They're completely flaccid. So, wherever they start to wherever your loading tab is your power range. If your barrel is 60 inches long and your bands are 30 inches long or 25 inches long, only what's left is what you're powering by. So in that sense, you're kind of very limited. So what do you do to power up a conventional gun? Well, you go longer. You go a thicker band, a thicker shaft, right? And then it makes it harder to load. You ever tried to load a big tuna gun and you got to reach way far out there? It's a very mechanically disadvantaged place to be. And by the time you load 5 of those long bands, you might be exhausted. And now you got to go jump in the water and try to shoot a big fish. So that's one aspect of it. So if you're looking at that aspect, a roller spear gun will use 100% of the barrel's length in its power band. But it is additionally under pretension before you even load it. So unlike a conventional gun where there's no tension whatsoever on the bands until you load them, and then you're only using 2/3 of the barrel to power the shaft, the roller gives you 100% of the barrel plus the added benefit of pretension. So that being said, you can actually use a shorter gun and get more power out of it. Now, who doesn't want to use a shorter gun? That gives you less bulk in the water, quicker tracking, more responsiveness. Those are all win-win variables, right?
So then when it comes to loading your gun, do you always recommend having a load assist, or is there other ways to do it?
In way of load assist, it's truly dependent on the load on the muzzle, right? So if you're shooting a single roller versus a double roller or an inverted roller or a fusion roller, there's a lot of different ways to attack the problem. If you're going to be shooting reef fish, a single roller is fine. You're probably going to be running a 14 or a 15 millimeter band on there, which is equivalent to 9/16. On the larger guns, you might run a 16 mil, which is a 5/8, or even an 18 millimeter rubber on a 7.5 mil shaft if you're looking for a bit more punch, if you're shooting larger fish. Another benefit of the rollers is a single stage roller will have one anchoring point on the underside of the barrel. And then you're going to anchor it all the way to the last shark fin tab closest to the trigger. That really only gives you one powering option. And I think when rollers were new, I know that's what it was when I first tried it. And I kind of got disappointed because when a fish would go in front of the reef, I couldn't really power it down. And then I was giving up potential shots because it's like, I can't take the shot, because you don't want to worry about missing the fish, bending the shaft, getting it lodged into the reef. So a couple ways you can turn a single stage roller into a multi-stage roller is you can have different anchoring points on the underside of the barrel, or you could get a shaft that has different position shark fin tabs. So that makes not only the gun easier to load because you can pull it from your hip to the first middle tab, reposition it, pull it back, reposition again, finish it off, as opposed to trying to manage one long pull, whereas when you get to this point, that's the hardest part and the rubber's under the most load, and then you got to try to finish it off there. That might be fine for 1 or 2 bands, but if you got a big gun and you're trying to do that 4 or 5 times, it's exhausting.
What is a fusion roller? I don't think I've heard of that one.
The fusion rollers are the ones where the bands attach to one point on top, you flip it over, they attach to another point on the bottom. So it's kind of like an inverted, but it utilizes more rubber than it does the actual piece of hollow spectra. So on an inverted roller, the only thing you see on the top is that spectra line, right? And all your rubber's under the gun. Whereas with the fusions, you've got rubber on the underside and the top side. And they
Interesting.
tend to be wider.
Gotcha. And then when it comes to roller muzzles, because I know you're pretty deep into the thick of it, is there much difference between like a stainless steel bearing, ceramic bearings, no bearings? Is there, what should we be thinking about there?
Oh, definitely. I mean, like any product, right? If you compare it to a vehicle, you can get the base cheap model or you can get the Lamborghini. All depends what you want. If you're doing a wheel that just has, Delrin, it doesn't even have bearings. It's just plastic, right? It's slick plastic. And then you can get into acetal glass bearings, which certainly are better, or you can get into the ceramic, which are the best you can get, right? And the beauty of the ceramic is they're not fracturable. They don't collapse. So a good example of that, you could use acetal glass with a double roller, but you wouldn't want to use it with an inverted because the inverted carries so much power that it could actually break those bearings. Whereas the ceramic has no give, no play, it won't fracture like the acetal glass will. And the ceramic spin about 6 to 7 times longer than the acetal glass. So how does that transfer over? Number one, it makes it easier to load. And number two, it creates a quicker rate of retraction. So in the way of rollers, that's what you want. How quickly the rubber moves from point A, which is the last shark fin tab, to the muzzle, which is point B. The quicker the rate of retraction, the more speed is generated on that shaft, which means a flatter, smoother, more accurate shot.
Now, anytime there's like moving parts, like as a mechanical engineer, I'm always worried, that something could fail. So is there anything you have to do specifically to be more diligent about care of a bearing system because of the salt water, or maybe like some sand gets in there and you're gonna just chomp up that bearing? Like, are they all sealed?
Good question. So in the way of bearings, sand obviously is going to be your enemy with any bearing. So if you were to do, say, a shoreline entry and there was a lot of kicked up sand or silt, ideally, once you get out of that and you get into cleaner water, you simply spin the bearings before you load it. And then, of course, every time you get out of the water when you're done using it, you want to flush those bearings out, spin it out. You want to avoid salt deposits. If you do get salt deposits, real simple, just shoot some warm water in there or just some regular old tap water and spin them until they're free again. So no oils required, no lubricant in any way, just flushing with clean water.
Perfect. And then are there any rollers that you like that people should know about?
Well, I'm a bit biased because I'm a distributor for Manny Sub in the U.S. and Hawaii. And, what you have to understand, which most people don't, is the vast majority of spear fishing or spear gun manufacturers, unfortunately, don't know what they're doing. And that's a bold statement. But if you see something become popular, most companies, if they've never dabbled in that arena before, will jump on that bandwagon because they're saying, hey, these rollers are popular. This is the trend. We need to come out with our own roller head because we don't want to miss out, right? That being said, they didn't really do the time to do the research, the development of the product. They didn't pool test it. They just kind of threw something together and pushed it out on the market. So there is a huge variation between one company's product to another. And I'm not going to mention any names, but I'm sure there are people that have had negative experience with certain brands and more positive experiences with others.
Well, perfect. I think that does it for this episode, guys. If you want to reach out to Brian, hit him up on Instagram at Uncle Learn You How. And until next time, tomorrow we're actually going to be talking about diving in strong current. So be sure to listen in. Thanks, Brian.